Hello friends, and welcome again to another session of Understanding Islam. Today what we're going to be looking at is a couple of, first of all we're going to start off with the city that later on becomes its own kingdom, and then we're going to look at another kingdom itself, going back looking at Arabia, Petraea. A little bit of a catch up from last time. Remember, we talked about the kingdom of Kedar, and then we also talked about the Nabateans, and we talked about the Nabateans and their city of Petra. And then a little bit later on this session, we're going to be going back and looking at Arabia Petraea, which basically looks again at the Nabateans, but a little bit later on in their timeline, especially in regards to the Roman occupation and conquering of the old kingdom of the Nabateans and becoming its own province. So, having said all that, let's go ahead and get started. We want to start off with the city of Palmyra. We're going to put this Palmyra. And it, as a city, was about 2000 before the Christian era to about 1600 of the Christian era. So the city had a quite long history, and as you can tell, lasted for a very long time. So let's go ahead and get started. When you look at the actual origins of the name of Palmyra, the origins of the name are somewhat unclear. However, some scholars believe that the city got its name from some of the palm trees that were growing near it in its originating site. The city, because of the palm trees, it makes a lot of sense. The city was founded on an oasis that was about 215 kilometers northeast of Damascus. So it probably, that this is Damascus and what would be Syria today. Palmyra would probably be somewhere up and about here. It was 215 kilometers northeast of Damascus and about 180 kilometers southwest of the city of Deir ez-Zor, near the Euphrates River, and this is Euphrates that's coming down here. The Euphrates, the Tigris, there. Palmyra as a city owed its importance through its trading. When you look here at where it's at, its proximity to the Mediterranean, as well as this being the basis of Mesopotamia and all the different lands to the east, you can see why it would be a very important trading area for items that are transiting from the Med to the east, particularly the grain basket and then from the east back to the west, looking at all the crops that were able to be grown in that fertile crescent, that area of the Tigris and the Euphrates. So that's where Palmyra gets its importance, is basically as a trading city. The earliest known reference to the city is by its Hebrew name, Tadmor, or also Tudmor, and that's spelled Tadmor or Tadmur or Tudmur. You'll see different spellings of that depending upon where you actually what work that you're looking at. But basically, it is that comes from the Amorite language, and it means the town that repels. Another meaning, a very similar meaning, is the indomitable town in Aramaic. If you look at Tadmor with this spelling right here, You will see it in the Bible in 2 Chronicles chapter 8 as a desert city that was built or fortified. Now, again, going back, maybe look at its original establishment as an oasis town. Solomon actually takes this oasis town and makes it into a fortified city, approximately 2,000 years before the birth of Christ. Flavius Josephus also ascribes the origins of the city to Solomon in his book, The Antiquities of the Jews, book 8, and associates Tadmor with this Greek name of Palmyra. Solomon built the city as a fortified community to protect the trade routes across the Syrian desert and as a caravan resting place. And as we talked about before, when you look at how the land is laid out here, that makes perfectly good sense. So that again, the city had existed before Solomon fortified it. Solomon just made it as a fortified town to be able to protect the trade. There are several citations in the Talmud, as well as in the Midrash, that refers to the city in the Syrian desert. And with the Talmud, sometimes they interchange the D and the T, so that it now becomes Tatmor instead of Tadmor. So that's, looking at some of the early books from the Talmud and also the Midrash. The city was known colloquially as the Bride of the Desert. When the Macedonian Greeks, the Seleucids, occupied Syria in about 323 BCE, the city was left alone to become an independent city-state. And this was, when you look at the history with the Macedonians, this was a very common practice in that time, where that you would have separate city-states that were allied in a kind of a loose allegiance for purposes that matched the individual city-states. For example, you'd have the city-state of Athens, the city-state of Sparta, and there's Thracia. There's a lot of these different city-states that later on, underneath Alexander and some of the people that followed Alexander, the Macedonian city-state concept was gradually brought into much more of a national entity. So Palmyra became one of these city-states approximately 323 BCE. And again, even with the Greeks, its importance as a trading route, or as a place on the trading route, and was what allowed them to be able to set it up as a separate city-state. In 41 BCE, Mark Antony sent a fighting force against the city in an attempt to take control of it. And if you can imagine, Mark Antony takes the city-state. Now he's got this fortified city that sits right on top of the caravan route. So now he controls the caravan route. Well, the residents of the city received advance notice of it, and they just moved the city across the Euphrates River. And now that you have the Euphrates River between Antony and Mark Antony, he was not able to come across, and so eventually his attempts to take the city over failed, and the inhabitants moved back into the original situation, the original city site. This kind of gives you this idea about the nomadic nature of the city and also the time. Helps you kind of just understand how this is kind of like a snapshot of how the people at this time really functioned. Unless there were specific things like the city of Petra, where that it didn't make sense to move the city, unless there were hard and fast features such as water or grazing lands or things like that, that tied the people to that. They were very, very easily nomadic. It wasn't until the middle of the 1st century of the Christian era that the city actually came under Roman rule, and it became part of the province of Syria. So when you look here at Syria, it's in this kind of general area here, maybe moving up a little bit further there, but Palmyra becomes part of this overall Syrian province. And that was underneath the reign of Tiberius, which is about 14 to 37 of the Christian era. this actual governance or control by the Romans actually worked to the benefit of the city, because with this Roman rule, the importance of Palmyra as a city becomes even more prominent, because now what happens is, because Rome actually has the city on the caravan route that can tie in that to the rest, to other Roman interests, so that allows the trade routes to extend all the way into Persia. If you go here down into Persia, into the area here, also allows them to go across from Persia into India, which would be even further over to the east, and then if you go to the northeast, up into China, with Roman Mediterranean ports in Syria and here in Phoenicia down here. And again, I think you can understand the importance militarily and also economically that the Roman Empire actually placed upon the city, because in a sense this is a linchpin to these caravan routes, these other merchant routes, and also to, as I said earlier, the availability of sea trade from Rome, which would have been over here. These sea routes really underscores the importance of Palmyra as a city state. Now, prior to the Roman influence, most of what they were trading, or the routes that were coming through here, were, again, like we talked about before, with some of the other kingdoms, where a major element of trade was the different spices, particularly frankincense and myrrh. But now with the Romans and the access to all these other different trade routes, including India and China and Persia, now you start to look at the silk trade. So the silk coming out of over here in China, and maybe perhaps in India, and some of the other spices coming out of India, brings it up through here, and then now becomes kind of this handling area where it goes to the Mediterranean, and then goes to these Roman cities. So now its prominence and importance increases more, because there's much more different items that are being traded. In 129 of the Christian era, the Emperor Hadrian toured the city and was so enamored with it that he proclaimed Palmyra to be a free and independent city and renamed it Palmyra Hadriana. Him being not an egotistical type person, he names the city after himself. I guess that's what Roman emperors do. So about 212 of the Christian era, Palmyra's importance to the silk trade begins to diminish as the Sassanids, which is basically the Persian Greeks. Remember when Alexander had gone through, he left these had left Greek emperors in different parts of the world that he had conquered. And so you wound up with the Ptolemies down in Egypt. You look at the Sassanids that were over in what would be India, maybe in Persia, and covering this area. The Sassanid Greeks basically covering this area here. The Sassanids conquered the entrance and fortified the entrances to the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, which actually flow together. This is probably not exactly right. Probably a little bit more like this. But the Sassanids conquered this area in here, where the Tigris and the Euphrates come together at the head of the Persian Gulf. And now, because of this area, they're able to control much more closely the flow of silk coming out of India. And so that lessens the importance of Palmyra. And about this time, around 212 of the Christian era, Septimius Odenaeus, a ruler of Palmyra, was appointed by the Roman Emperor Valerian to be the governor of the Syrian province. Valerian was captured by the Sassanids. Again, the area's in here. So Valerian was captured by the Sassanids, and he died in captivity in Bishapur. Odenaeus campaigned as far east as Sistaphon a city near the modern day Baghdad, in retribution for Valerian's death, and invaded the city twice. When Odaenathus was assassinated by his nephew Marconius, Odaenathus' wife Septimia Zenobia assumed control of the Roman province, again the province of Syria, and ruled the city-state of Palmyra in her son Vabalithus' stead. Zenobia revolted against Roman rule with the assistance of Cassius Longinus, captured Basra, and its territories far to the west is Egypt. So Zenobia with Cassius Longinus moved down and captured this part of the Roman Empire, going as far over as to the west as to Egypt. Additionally, she captured Antioch as well as other large sections of Asia Minor to the north. So this would be Asia Minor up here. So she moved not up in here and also down in this direction here. So she's basically looking here at pretty much what we'd consider to be the biblical lands. This was the extent of the geographical importance of the Palmyrene Empire. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where you have a city-state that eventually evolves into this empire. However, as I said, it didn't last very long. In 272 of the Christian era, the Emperor Aurelian regained Roman control of the province by besieging and sacking Palmyra. And after this sacking, the city never regained its former prominence. During the campaign, Aurelian captured Zenobia and later brought her back to Rome. In accordance with the protocol of the time, he paraded her through the city in the presence of the senator Marcellus Petrus Nutinus. After this, she was allowed to withdraw to a village in the town of Tabor. Rome established a fortress manned by a Roman legion to protect this juncture of the Roman roads in the Syrian desert. So let me kind of bring this in. So what winds up happening is Zenobia, along with Cassius Longinus, revolts against Rome, captures this area going from Egypt down here in the south up through the Syrian province and up into Asia Minor. And then Aurelian goes, that's enough of this, goes in, captures the town, sacks it, takes Zenobia captive back home, parades her through the city of Rome. And this is very common practice for the captives to be paraded in front of the citizens, and then allows her to withdraw to the city of Tabor. But the offshoot of this is Rome says enough of this independent stuff. This is, you're part of a Roman province. We're going to set up our own fortified fortress here to protect the juncture of these trade routes in this particular part of Syria. The Emperor Diocletian later increased the number of legions committed to the city, as well as building a wall around the city to protect it from the Sassanids. The city was captured by the Muslim leader Khalid ibn al-Walid in 634 of the Christian era, but al-Walid allowed it to remain intact. The city was abandoned by a large number of its inhabitants beginning about 800 of the Christian era because of the civil wars that resulted from the overthrow of the Umayyad caliphs. During the time of the Crusades, the city was underneath the control of the Burid rulers of Damascus, and later underneath the control of Zair ad-Din Taktekin, who was a Turkish military ruler, and then Muhammad ibn Shirkuh, and was later brought underneath the Homs emirs. In the 16th century, Qala at Ibn Main Castle was built on top of a mountain overlooking the oasis by Fakir ad-Din al-Main II, a Lebanese prince who tried to control the Syrian desert. Later on, the castle was surrounded by a moat with access only available through a drawbridge. And now what you're looking at happening is these Arabs are starting to learn from the Crusades, from the architecture of the Crusaders who've been fighting in this land. And now what you start to see is what you would imagine scene of a fortress town in Europe with a moat, the walls, and the drawbridge. It is possible that earlier fortifications existed on the hill well before then. However, these fortifications were what you would see now. This Fakir ad-Din becomes part of the Ottoman Empire. The city declines underneath the Ottoman rule, and eventually is reduced to no more than an oasis village with a small garrison, which is going back again to some of its earlier times when that's really all it was just a fortified city on these trade routes. But it was still known by the name Tadmur or Tedmur in Arabic. In about the 17th century, the Christian era, its location was rediscovered by Western travelers and was studied by European and American archaeologists beginning in the 19th century. There is now a modern city with the same name located next to the ruins. Palmyra, at its height, was known for its large-scale limestone monuments that were used as funerary art shaped into human busts to represent the deceased. Generally, the inhabitants had Aramaic names and worshipped a variety of gods from Mesopotamia, such as Marduk and Ruda, Syria, Hada, Baal, Astarte, Arabia, Allat, and Greece, Athena. They originally spoke Aramaic and later Greek as their primary languages. At the time of the Islamic conquest, the city was inhabited by several Arab tribes, most notably the Qadaha and the Kalb. Alright, this went a little bit longer than what we normally do for the YouTube, so those of you who are watching on YouTube, thank you very much for being with us today. If you're interested in looking at the rest of today's presentation, I encourage you to go to the website, halcyonipublishing.com, where that you can be able to purchase the other part of today's lesson. If you're also interested, I encourage you to take my blog. It's 99 cents a month and allows you to be able to look at the tapings that we've done for the month. No additional charges. You have the full taping for the 99 cents, so I think that's probably a pretty good deal financially for you. Again, if you're interested in some of these Islamic terms and phrases and explanations of them, I encourage you to purchase my book, Islam, The Way of Submission, which is available on the Halcyone Publishing website and is also available through Kindle, and you can be able to purchase that. So again, thank you very much, those of you who are watching via YouTube. Appreciate it very much you being with us, and please come back in a couple of weeks for our next session. So for those of you, good luck and good day.